All right. Hi, everybody. I am Becca. I'm an alcoholic and addict. I'm really excited to be able to share my story with everybody. I love this group. I stumbled upon this group. I didn't know anything like this existed until I found this room. And oh my gosh, am I so happy. I haven't wanted to leave. In fact, I missed 2 days this week. And I was like, I miss my family. So I'm really happy to be back here and to be able to share my story with you. So I'm going to start kind of to just give you a little bit of background about where I'm coming from, like childhood, the things that set me up for, I guess, this life. So I am the granddaughter of a Methodist minister. My parents raised me in a very religious home. I always had some issues from a very young age um, with their belief system. I just had problems with it. I remember at about the age of 8 asking my parents and thinking it was so weird that we could be the only ones that were right. But I kind of stuck with it. You know how when you're a kid, you kind of it's really easy to just go along with what your parents teach you, and especially when they're taking you to church a couple times a week, and they had me involved with the church and everything. And anyway, so I kind of went along with that for a while, and then also my dad was a teacher at the school where I went to school growing up. And the town that I'm from is very small. It's a very rural town, but it's a resort town. So it has a population that really, really expands and contracts quite a bit. I haven't been back there since 2020. And even then, didn't spend much time there. So when I was there, it was very, very small. So anyway, my dad was a teacher, and he wasn't exactly a very well-liked teacher. So that made things kind of hard for me in school, also because with it being a resort town, a lot of the families and kids that I went to school with had a fair amount of money, and obviously teachers don't have that kind of paycheck. So between him not being real well liked and the not having the money and the stuff that all the other kids did, I always felt like I was on the outside, like I didn't belong with anybody, but like I was acquaintances with everyone, so like no one didn't like me, but I didn't feel like anybody really liked me. And also because people didn't like my dad, I found myself when I got to high school wanting to, and I don't know if it was a conscious choice at that time, but wanting to separate myself from him as much as I could. And with the upbringing that I had, for me, the best way to separate myself was to do all the things that everyone else thought that, ooh, that's, teacher's daughter. She's not going to do that. She's a, goody two shoes. She's this. And I was kind of a know-it-all kid. I liked school. My mom had to like force me to stay home. I always wanted to go to school. Like if I was sick, my mom had to basically like pin me down and keep me home. So I always was the kid with my hand raised and everything. But once I got to high school, while I was still good in school, and I still did very well, got good grades, played sports and all of that, I just wanted people to like me. And so the very first time I got drunk was actually in 8th grade. And it was one time, it was me and one of my friends at her house, and we were playing Nintendo 64, Mario Kart. And we had a blast. I was like, this is really fun. I like this. And and I felt kind of crappy the next day, obviously, and didn't really think too much about it. But then once I got into 9th grade, that's when everything kind of kicked in. had a crush on a boy. Like, how many stories start that way? Um, and he was kind of the kid that, I mean, he was the skater kid with all of the studs on all of his clothes, and always smoking weed, always smoking weed. And of course, he's the person that my parents didn't want me around. Go figure. And so I started hanging out with him my freshman year, and we would go and we would be smoking weed before school, at lunch, after school. And I always just made sure not to get high right before like a really difficult class. So we had like 90-minute classes. Um, and all of my hard ones were at the same time. So if I just didn't smoke then, it was okay. Um, and that just kind of went on for a while. I remember, the good old Mad Dog 2020. That was a thing that happened on lunch breaks sometimes and after school. We could just drive up in the woods and drink up there. And then at the end of my freshman year, I got a job in a local restaurant that even for a restaurant was a bit shady. But I ended up working there for 10 years, and that's where the boy worked, and his mom was my boss. So we kind of, when you work in restaurants, it's really easy to get drugs and alcohol, no matter what age you are. It's really quite easy. And so that became a thing. And then my sophomore year in high school, I got into my boyfriend. It was that same boy that I had the crush on, the one with all the studs on his clothes and the bass in his car and all of that. We got in a car accident. We rear-ended somebody, and I didn't wear my seatbelt. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, neither was he. And I hit the windshield and basically just smashed my whole face. I lost all my eyebrows. I like had glass all in my face. It was falling out for like 10 months. But after that wreck, the police ended up breaking into my boyfriend's trunk with a crowbar. So they weren't really able to get him for it because he had a very large bong in the trunk. And of course, my parents were incredibly, incredibly angry about that and didn't want me to see him anymore. And of course, I still did. And but after that, I didn't smoke weed anymore. And it was weird. It wasn't a thing I had to try. I was just like, well, I'm not going to be able to see him anymore if I smoke weed or if he does. So I just quit. And so weed was kind of like that went away. That part of my life went away. But the alcohol started picking up. And I remember there was one friend of mine that I had been in school with since 7th grade. And I remember my senior year, him telling me that he thought I had a problem with alcohol. I thought that was hilarious. I was like, oh my God, he's so uptight. He's so, like, isn't he ridiculous? And man, if I would have listened, shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I would have listened and maybe actually really took a minute to introspect, but I did not. So after high school, I split up with that high school boyfriend, and I started a relationship with the man that I ended up marrying when I was 19 years old. He was almost 16 years older than me, and he was a regular at the bar next door to the restaurant where I worked. And actually, he and I were really great together. But the thing was, he was always at the bar. I mean, his truck pretty much lived at the bar until eventually, after we were married, I was like, what's the point of me working if you're just going to spend it all at the bar? But still, he and all of our friends that we hung out with on a regular basis, we drank every day. Every single day we went to the bar. And it was supposed to be for happy hour, which usually turned into past dark, and still have to work the next day, still have to worry about how do we get back to the car. Luckily, we did not drive drunk. at that point. So we take a cab, and then we'd have to go pick up the car in the morning. And so that went on for a good 9 years. And during that time, I had also gotten my real estate license. I was doing that. We had bought a plumbing business, so I was doing the books for that. And then I was still waiting tables and bartending. After a while, that first job that I had, kind of things started getting difficult there. And then that boyfriend, that high school boyfriend of mine, he well, we don't know, but pretty certain he committed suicide. He was driving his truck, and he had been in trouble with the law, and he drove his truck at 80 miles an hour into a tree alongside the highway. And that was really hard for everyone, all my friends, for me. I still worked with his mom. His family was like another family to me. So that was really hard. And that was the first death of a lot of deaths that were either directly or indirectly caused by drugs and alcohol. But you know what we did to mourn his death? Yeah, we went to the bar and just got shit-faced all the time, just so we could cry together and whatever. So we kind of got through that. And I eventually quit that job, my first job. I was there for 10 years. And I was just going to do the real estate thing, but the market, it was 2008 at that point, and we all know kind of what happened then. So I went back to bartending at a new restaurant that felt like a family, but they were the most dysfunctional family you have ever met in your life. Like, every Christmas party was a competition to see who was the most physically injured, fucked up, shaking, yellow, whatever the next day. And who was going to work the day shift? Oh boy. And if you're working the night shift, well, you better get in there before opening to have your first Bloody Mary so you can go home and take a nap and come back for your shift. And even the owners of this restaurant would work the day shift, and then they would go sit at the bar until they were, fall down drunk, pass out in their own establishment. This was like a badge of courage, like badge of honor, like, you're awesome, you drank that much and you still work the next day. And I remember there were times we would take turns carrying out each other's soup cups because we'd be too shaky to put them down on the table in front of people. So after working there for a few years, I ended up separating from my husband because one of the nights I had gotten off work at that restaurant, there was another local bartender, and one of the owners of the establishment and this other bartender from a different bar. We all decided we wanted to go out and do karaoke. And somehow I blacked out. I don't know. When I woke up, I was in the bed with this other guy. I'm pretty sure nothing happened. I don't know. I, had all my clothes on, so I was assuming not. But that began like an immediate obsession with this person. We had this emotional affair for quite a long time. And then I ended up leaving my husband, which was not a very good idea. Let's just say that. And I ended up being with this guy for a couple of years while I was still working as a bartender at that restaurant. And he was into pills and meth, which I didn't know at first. But then he started buying like oxys, and we'd crush them up and snort them before work or whatever, and have a couple shots and go to work. And eventually that carried on so much that I started drinking at work too, because I'd be shaking so bad I couldn't hand drinks to people. Eventually one night I was celebrating a birthday with one of our regulars and taking shots together. And I remember I was picking everything up. I was putting my tills away, we actually, paper money, and we had cups, and we'd walk them up these steep ass stairs into the office to put everything away. I had all the tills, the cups in my hands, and I was walking up the stairs, and I'm shit faced. And I fell down backwards down onto this tile landing and landed on my shoulder and ended up tearing some muscles in there. It was horribly bruised, and got a call the next morning that I was not allowed to come back. Which was really, really hard for me at that point, because I had just, left my husband for this other guy. I had no stability. I was living with this other guy. He was still bartending, and I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do? And by that point, I was so physically dependent on alcohol that there was no way in hell that I could do any kind of work without drinking first. And at first it was like, okay, I'm going to just, chug one drink really quick. And then it began, I got to store vodka, straight vodka in my car. And then I'd have to sneak out during shifts so that I wouldn't be shaking so bad. And I eventually quit the other jobs that I got. So now I was jobless, living with this other bartender. And thus began 5 months of me sitting in a condo all day, every day, no job, drinking vodka, to the point that I couldn't eat anymore. Like, I just couldn't eat anymore. It's not like I was throwing up. Like, when I put food in my mouth, like, no saliva came, nothing. I was not hungry. And I started noticing, as time was going on, in the middle of the night, I would get up and I would be so dizzy that I felt like I was going to fall over. And I was like, what is this? And I knew that with the shakes, if I poured a drink, it would get better. And I thought, well, maybe that'll help with this dizziness too. It did, kind of. And then it kept getting worse. Now, our condo was on a second floor, and eventually it got to the point where we had one gas station kind of close to us. And I would go there and try and buy like a can of soup or something to eat. I never made it through the soup, but I'm like, I know I have to eat something. I can't survive on vodka alone. And at that time, my boyfriend had his teenage son living with us full time. And in our state, to get your driver's license, you have to have an adult riding with you, and you have to have so many hours of supervised driving. So while his dad was at work and I was so fucked up all the time, I would supervise his driving me to the liquor store. And then eventually it got to the point where, well, I couldn't get up and down those stairs anymore. My legs were so weak, my muscles had just gone away. And at that point, I would just start puking if I did try to eat. That's when the puking started. And I literally would go down those stairs, like if the sun couldn't drive me, I would have to somehow make my way out to get vodka. And I'd have to go down that flight of stairs. I'd sit down on the top stair and I'd scooch myself down on my butt, one stair at a time. Super fun. Until finally one day my boyfriend was getting ready to go to work, and he had been asking me, why can't you just get a job? I'm like, I don't know, something's wrong with me. And I had looked into alcohol withdrawal, and I was like, man, I really, really need to go to rehab. But I'm like, I have no way to pay for this. No way to pay for it. I had no insurance at that time. My ex-husband and I had been self-employed, and no restaurant's going to pay for insurance. So I didn't know what to do. So I tried to like taper myself down because I had read something about that, but I couldn't, because I would feel so fucking terrible every time I quit drinking that I could not taper down. And finally my boyfriend was getting ready to leave for work, and he asked me to come outside onto our little deck to have a cigarette with him. And he was like, hey, can you come into the light a little bit more? Because the condo had been pretty dark all the time. I just sat there on the couch all day, every day, drinking. And so I came out into the light, and he's like, can I take a picture of you? And he did. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I didn't know why. And then about an hour later, I hear a knock on my door. It's the old boss from the restaurant where I was fired and one of their long time employees. And they said, get your shit. We're taking you to the hospital. Apparently, my boyfriend had texted that picture of me, yellow eyes, belly sticking out, hair that was thinning so bad. Couldn't fit my feet into shoes because my feet were so swollen. And this is in December. This is right after Christmas. And they take me to the emergency room. And I knew I was in a bad way, but I didn't know how bad. So I was just sitting in the ER. Both my parents were there. My brother was there. Some of my coworkers were there. I didn't realize how dire this was until I was actually in on the bed, the hospital bed, and they said, we need to get you to Boise quick. Like, we need to get you to a big hospital very fast. They're like, we're calling the helicopter. And I was like, well, wait, can my mom ride with me? Like, if she can't, can we just go in the ambulance? And they're like, we can't wait for an ambulance for you. So I was life flighted to the hospital down here where I spent a week in the ICU. I was sent a social worker to have me put my affairs in order. I kind of turned to the hospital staff and the social worker and I said, get the fuck out of my room and get me a different doctor. I am not dying. They sent me another doctor who came in with a much more positive attitude. And he told me, so you're going to have to quit drinking, right? This is while I'm in ICU. And I also got C. diff, which is the most horrible thing. It's like an infection you pick up in the hospital. And when your liver's that bad, it's like, and you're just shitting. And so I had to ring an alarm so hopefully the hospital staff could get me to the bathroom that was 2 feet away because I couldn't get my ass there. There was an alarm on the bed if I tried. So anyway, I'm in that state and the doctor comes in and says, hey, you're not going to be able to drink anymore. And I was like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean I can't drink anymore? Like, I'm just going to get better, right? And he was like, no, actually, like, your chances aren't real good right now. He's like, if you do what I say and you promise that you'll never drink again, we'll get you through this. So that's what I did. And after a week, I went home to my mom's house. And that's how I moved to the place I live now. It was in that helicopter. And I was sober for 2 years. You would think that would be enough, right? Think I've had enough? No, I'm pretty stubborn. That wasn't enough. So I was in a new city, jobless, living with my mom. I had been a homeowner, a business owner. I owned, I had a nice car. I had, my real estate license. I was doing all the things. And now I'm living in my mom's house with literally nothing. But I was determined. And so I would go to the gym every day. At first, I would just sit on a bike and put you can make the resistance either stronger or less. Well, I would make it, there was no resistance and I could barely get my legs to move that. And I would just do that while my stepdad was there. And then eventually I got to the part where my stepdad could like carry me basically to the pool. And I started trying to walk in the pool. I couldn't even step up onto like a 6-inch curb. I had compression socks on that I couldn't put on by myself. My dad had to help me with that. Oh shit, I haven't talked about this part in a long time, all the details. Anyway, so that was really hard. And I ended up getting another job in a restaurant again, of course. And then I ended up getting 2 more jobs, also in restaurants and bartending. But I still stayed sober. And through all of that, I didn't go to AA. I was like, I didn't understand. I didn't really understand the program. And I was like, why on earth would I go sit around in a basement with a bunch of people and talk about the one thing that I can't do anymore. So I refused. And then slowly but surely, I was getting better. I was getting better. And within 6 months, I had myself into literally the best shape of my life. Like I was fit, I was strong, like I wanted to compete in a figure competition. And I was like well on my way. And then that boyfriend that I had been living with when I got sent down to the hospital, yeah, we broke up. But not before he introduced me to methamphetamine. And so here I am, new town, single. I've tried meth, and I'm lonely and I'm scared. Living by myself for the first time in my life. And I just started a new career. I needed a roommate because I couldn't afford my apartment. I decided to take an entry-level job, actually at the job that I have now. But it was not enough to pay the bills to live alone. And just so happens the person that was my roommate was on drugs. I didn't know this at the time. But anyway, I decided after a while I was going to start dating again. And for some reason, every single person that I ran into on a dating app was on meth. And I was like, well, that was really fun. And you know what? When I'm on meth, I don't think about booze at all. This is like my wonder drug. And I have ADHD, and it just calmed me down. It settled me down. I never felt like it was doing anything bad to me. It didn't ruin my job. It didn't ruin everything. And in fact, what it made is it made me feel invincible, which I needed, because when I was living by myself for the first time, I was raped in my own home, which was not great, obviously. But when I was on meth, I didn't give a fuck. Didn't give a fuck. And eventually I ended up meeting another guy who had told me, like when I met him, that he had had a problem with meth 20 years prior. And so I didn't tell him that I was a multiple times daily meth user. We were together for 2 years before I finally felt like such a piece of shit, such a liar, that I had to just tell him. And I told him. He was furious, obviously. He has a daughter that was born with a heart condition that leaves her with basically half of a heart. So if anything like that would have gotten around her, things would have been bad, very bad. So I went to rehab then. And I thought I was going just for meth. I thought, no, I kicked this alcohol thing. I kicked it. And honestly, when I quit meth, when I went to rehab, it was honestly a great experience to just be away for a while. And I realized while I was there that meth had been doing a bit more damage to me than I thought. Like my hand-eye coordination was completely gone. I had not felt any emotion at all the whole time I was using. And so when I got back from rehab, I was like, great, now everything is going to be fine. Me and the boyfriend, we're going to be back together. It's going to be great. And then I can drink. I was like, I don't have a problem with it anymore. But I started drinking again. And it was, at first, it was fun. It was a little bit. Me and the boyfriend were doing good. And then we started not doing so good. We both started drinking a lot. Again, I kept getting my liver tests done. All my enzymes were fine. So I didn't worry about it. Until eventually that relationship became abusive. There was physical, emotional, every kind of abuse you can imagine. And so it eventually got to such a point where he had put a gun up against my head and told me he was going to kill me. Broke up with him, and then we managed to get back together. I went back to that guy. That's how fucked up I was. I went back to that guy. And I stayed with him for a year. And we split up just this spring, just this last spring. So now I'm 38, single, no kids, want kids, and I've got this history. What am I going to do? So I moved out of that house and I decided today is the day I make my life what I want it to be. Because I know I'm better than this. I'm not going to put up with being treated like that anymore. And you know what? The best way to not be treated like that anymore is to be sober. So I started attempting to quit drinking again in about May of this year. And I did pretty good. But I would still have like, one of those nights where I'd run and get a couple White Claws, drink a couple of White Claws. And I was like, just a couple of White Claws. But then I started coming into meetings. I hadn't all the way quit yet, started coming into meetings. And then I was like, okay, no, I'm going to do this. I'm quitting. And I made it about, I want to say approximately 45, between 45 and 60 days. Messed up once, drank, and got back on the horse the next day. And now I'm at 35 days. Brings me to now where I'm a participant in AA, an active participant. And I can't tell you how much happier I am. The friendships that I've made in these rooms in the shortest amount of times mean the world to me. Like I wake up every morning, I don't think about booze. I think about meetings and I think about all of you. And I couldn't drink again, knowing that I'd let you guys down. I'd let my other group down. So now I feel hopeful. I feel happy. Things are going great. My work is going great. Now I just got to find that guy and have that baby, but I'm going to focus on this for now. Thanks, you guys.